Terry Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting. Dodo Bird, Black Adam is here with me, Director of Scouting, 24/7 Sports, regular contributor, CBS Sports HQ. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do to that like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, please also do that while you're here. Let's get into it. We didn't plan to talk to you on this Monday, but we also didn't plan on watching UConn's 17-game winning streak dating back to last season get snapped by Memphis in the Maui Invitational. But that's what just happened. Final score, Memphis 99, UConn 97 in OT. Wild game to jumpstart the Maui Invitational. Fink, before we take it wherever we're going to take it, just your general thoughts on 45 minutes of basketball we just watched out on the island.
Terrific game, first and foremost. Great opening to Feast Week, getting everybody awfully excited about college basketball. Couldn't have been a more dramatic ending, and I would venture to say the post-game press conference is going to be fairly entertaining as well.
I imagine it would be. Obviously, not to skip to the end before we discuss everything else, but Dan Hurley got a technical foul with around 40 seconds to play in overtime in a game that at the time was tied 92-92. PJ Carter ends up going to the line, hits 2 free throws, then gets the technical free throws. So he goes 4 for 4. And I don't want to say the game ended there because it obviously didn't.
That was the game.
UConn did technically have a shot at the buzzer, but I'm with you. I can't insist that Dan Hurley cost UConn that game in that moment, but it didn't help. It didn't help.
All right. Do you want to go into this now, or do you want to work our way up to this?
Yeah, let's talk. Let's start there.
All right, so here's my thing with this. First of all, the over-the-back call on Liam McNeely, 50-50 call at best. You heard Jay Billis on TV. Everybody that's a really tough call in a tie game with 40, whatever it was, 40 seconds left to play in the game. So that's already a swing of potentially Liam McNeely going to the free throw line for 2 free throws. And now you've got Memphis going to the free throw line for 2 free throws. Dan gets very animated, and he was animated all game. But if you go back and watch that replay, you will see very clearly he is grabbing the shirt, the polo shirt of associate head coach Kamani. He's grabbing Kamani's shirt, pulling him in front of him, Kamani Young. And he clearly thought he had more rope there. He was clearly saying, that looked to me like a strategy of Kamani, hold me back, and I'm going to make my point here. And rightfully so, because that was a questionable call. I don't think you make that over the back call in that point in the game. The technical, we can assess whose fault it was. Is it Dan's fault? Is it the official's fault? Different people are going to have different perspectives, but that was in fact the game. My point is that I think he thought he had more rope. I think it was a strategy, him pulling Kamani in front of him, and thought he could really work the refs hard in that situation. That obviously proved to not be the case.
Yeah, I guess I could argue it both ways. On one hand, Dan clearly said or did something that the official thought crossed the line. Otherwise, you don't blow that whistle in that moment, because if you're an official and you are aware, which is what we always tell players to do, be aware of time and score. If you're aware of time and score, when you blow this whistle, you're probably deciding the game. So Clearly the official thought Dan crossed the line, and Dan can't cross that line. That's one point. The counterpoint would be, yo, man, you're an official. You've been dealing with Dan Hurley for 44 minutes in this game of basketball time, in real time, like more than 2 hours. Yeah. He's been yelling at you and calling you stuff all game long, and you let it go. Really? Is this where you want to blow the whistle and put it to a stop? If a UConn fan's argument is, if you want to give Dan Hurley a tech for crossing the line, do it in minute 2, minute 7, minute 14, because he probably did it in minute 2, 7, 14, and every 4 minutes after that. Why wait to the 44th minute, technically the 45th minute of a tie game to put your fingerprints on this? I get that too.
And listen, I don't envy those officials. I would, that's like a nightmare having to officiate a Dan Hurley. I would want no part of that. But I will say this. Even if you tend to defend officials, which I think I do, I have friends who are officials, it's hard to argue that the officiating in the last minute of this game played a crucial role in deciding who won this one. That's not to say that Memphis didn't deserve it, but the way the whistles went from, you know, that sequence we're talking about, from the elbow in the face to Sampson, to the Solomon Ball, excuse me, and then the steal that was called a foul on Liam McNeely in the last 8 games. There is a lot of ammunition for this post-game press conference.
No question. Before we get back into the details of the game, the big story is our back-to-back champs losing for the first time when playing a legitimate opponent for the first time. And on the other side, it's a Memphis program that I don't have to bore you with the details, but there is no Memphian that is more beloved than Penny Hardaway, and it has gotten really complicated in the past couple of years. He's been the head coach of his alma mater for 6 years. They've made 2 NCAA tournaments. They've won 1 NCAA tournament game. They've had more investigations than NCAA tournament wins. He fired the bulk of his staff, you know, a month before the season started. There's, you know, been suspension. It's just one off the court headline after another, most of them not great. But still, even as I have been critical of the fact that this has not gone well, or at the very least smoothly, I can still acknowledge the very best thing for Memphis and Memphis fans is for Penny to figure out how to get this thing on the tracks and do all of the things, or at least most of the things that he promised he would do on the day he was hired. And for Memphis fans today, it's like I can't even focus on what we're doing right here because my text messages are getting blown up by neighbors and relatives. People.
Your mom's thrilled.
My mom is like, you know, yes, people are fired up. I don't know how to explain this to somebody who's not from here, because cities of this size, you know, they all have college basketball programs. And I say this as respectfully as I can say it, but like Houston's basketball program does not resonate in Houston the way Memphis's basketball program resonates in Memphis, even though Houston's basketball program is amazing.
Yeah.
Like Memphis basketball, the Grizzlies are the biggest thing here now, clearly because of John Morant, Jaren Jackson, Desmond Bane. But Tiger basketball is a part of the DNA. Like people here so badly want to love it and care about it. And it's hard when you're playing in this version of the AAC. And when even in this version of the AAC, you've never actually won it, which is a problem. The passion has cooled a little bit, and people have become frustrated at the chaos because the success on the court has never really matched the chaos, not for any extended period of time. So a day like today is a long time coming, and I'm genuinely happy for Penny. I don't know where it goes from here, but you know, as of November 25th, he's got a 5-0 basketball team with a massive victory on a neutral court on a big stage that Maui provides. And when I update the top 25 and 1 on Tuesday, they will be safely in the top 26.
So let me ask you this, GP, and this was a question posed to us over text messages about an hour ago now, when we thought Memphis was going to run away with this, and then obviously it became much more dramatic than expected. Is this the biggest win of Penny Hardaway's tenure so far?
I tweeted that it was, but you can obviously debate that. He does have an NCAA tournament win over Boise State. You know, that's a tournament victory. You could say that's bigger because it advanced you in a bracket. He has
Did the city get as excited about that as they are about this?
No, I don't think so, because it was, with all due respect, but it was Boise State, whatever.
Right.
This is UConn. This is Dan Hurley. Memphis has won an AAC tournament. Memphis beat Houston when Houston was on its way to a 1 seed. He's had other big wins, but given the context, the fact that he's on the hot seat, like if this season doesn't go well, he might not get a year 8. That's the reality of it. And so, I don't know that he's ever needed a win more than he needed a big win early in this season to keep the fans not just calm, but excited, as opposed to frustrated and jumping on message boards and wondering if, you can hire Steve Forbes after this year or something like, or Will Wade or something like that. So, I think it is. To answer your question simply, in a long-winded way, I think this is the biggest win of Penny Hardaway's head coaching career.
All right.
I want to ask you specifically about UConn because obviously Dan is running in the best program in America. They won back-to-back national championships. They have a legitimate shot to win 3 straight, even though they did lose 4 starters. But they did lose 4 starters, and their first game in this new version of themselves against a legitimate opponent obviously didn't go well for them. They were 8.5-point favorite. They trailed by double digits for a chunk of the game and had to rally just to force overtime. So we'll talk UConn next. But first, let's just get one word from our partners.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
So, Fig, we were talking yesterday, and I asked you if you gave Memphis a puncher's chance against UConn. You sort of flipped it around and said, "Hey, listen, you're the one who lives there. You tell me." And I think what I said was, I think Memphis is the best team in the. I don't know. I didn't say this exactly, but I have forever thought Memphis should have been picked to win the AAC. I'm not sure why AAC coaches went with UAB instead of the Tigers. When you look at the roster, it's clearly a more talented roster. I guess if you want continuity, you could look to Birmingham, but 3 weeks into the season, 3 weeks and a day into the season, Memphis looks the part. So I told you I thought Memphis could be good and had done some good stuff and was obviously shooting the ball incredibly well from three. And by the way, did it again today. They made 12 threes, 55% from the perimeter. They entered the game shooting 46% from three. Now even better. So I don't know if that's going to hold up, but through 5 games, they've been fabulous. And then what I said about UConn is, this is what I know. I know Dan Hurley's excellent. I know Alex Karabin's really good. Now we get to what I think. I think they'll be good eventually. I don't know that they're good now because they haven't played anybody, and they are asking everybody everybody on the roster is in a different role than they were last season. And then you sprinkle in the new guys as well. I still believe all of that. I think they'll be fine, but this was not a first great impression with these new look Huskies. You would agree with that?
I would. And I think the first thing Memphis did in this game, remember we said they had to get off to a good start. They hadn't gotten off to good starts, and they were playing a caliber of opponent. While they were still good wins, they were able to come back into that game. They got off to a better start today, and I thought that was really important. Got that new UConn group, I don't want to say on their heels, but they didn't get rolling in the first 5 minutes. It wasn't business as usual. There was a chance for pause. The other thing we talked about with UConn, will they have the same rim protection? They had 3 block shots today in a game that went to overtime. 3 block shots in 45 minutes. That looks like the answer, at least in this game, was no, not quite the same. Now, Samson Johnson has got to be more of a factor. He fouled out. He had 2 points, 0 rebounds, 0 blocks. That's got to change. That is something that UConn has got to get more production from. Now, the flip side of that coin is Terrace Reed. He was phenomenal. He had 22, 11, and 3 blocks. He had all 3 blocks for UConn. I think the bigger problem for UConn right now, and the part of the roster construction that they still have to figure out, is the backcourt rotation. Aiden Mahaney got the start tonight, and Memphis targeted him on that defensive end of the floor on almost every possession. And their guards, they both went for 20 plus. And that is a cause of concern. And Mahaney's got to be solid enough defensively to get by, but then he's got to be good enough offensively to justify only being solid defensively. He wasn't solid defensively tonight. He was poor. And offensively, there wasn't anywhere near, he made 2 threes, but other than that, there wasn't anywhere near enough value to justify what you were giving up defensively. And I think for UConn, that is probably the biggest area of concern in terms of how you figure out this lineup moving forward.
Yeah, because if you're really trying to go three-peat, and I know they really are, it's not great that Memphis might have better guards than you.
Right.
And it looked like that today. PJ Haggerty, and I think Tyrese Hunter's a little more well-known because he's played at some big programs. He's been in NCAA tournaments. But Tyrese Hunter and PJ Haggerty are good college basketball players. And they might be hired guns, but whatever.
Right.
That's the sport. That's the sport.
Right.
That's the sport we're covering. And through 45 minutes today, it looked like Memphis had better guards than UConn. And I don't want to go over the top because it's really one game that was decided in overtime. But it wasn't clear to me one of those teams, if you didn't know nothing about nothing, it wasn't clear to me one of those teams is going for a three-peat and the other one is picked second in the AAC.
I can't argue that.
Right.
I can't argue that. Especially, and I'll say this, especially at the ends of the lineups, especially with the bigs and especially with the guards. I think UConn's got really good wings, but I think it's those two ends of the lineups, the point guards and the bigs. Those are the question marks right now for the Huskies.
So if you're Dan Hurley, you go into that locker room. And by the way, I'm just sort of looking at Twitter while we're talking. Penny Hardaway in his post-game press conference did say that he believed this was the biggest win of his career.
Okay.
So that's his message
What did Dan say?
I haven't seen that yet, but I imagine he has to address with his team that, hey, I put you guys in a bad spot because he did.
Oh, wait, here we go. I've got a quote. Hurley calls the T called on him a joke. There you go.
Well, this is one where you could argue it either way. Like, letter of the law, you could call a technical foul on Dan Hurley every 3 minutes if you wanted to.
But if you don't do it for the first 44, don't do it with 40 seconds left in overtime.
I actually can subscribe to that. Like, how about this? I'm not saying the official was wrong. I am saying if I've let Dan Hurley yell at me for 44 straight minutes, I'm going to let him yell at me one more time and not put my whistle into this game. And I'm not a believer in don't let the refs decide the game. Like if Aiden Mahaney is driving to the rim and he gets clothesline, call the foul. I don't care if 1 second left, decide the game. I'm fine with it. But I just can't imagine that Dan Hurley did nothing to get a technical foul for 44 minutes, but then did something to get one in 45. Yeah. And I'm certain he did something to get one in the 45th. I'm just saying, if you don't call anything for 44, why are we doing it at 45? I understand that complaint from UConn fans. I actually understand that from Dan, even if I can acknowledge Dan probably did do something where if the ref just want to say, hey, here's what he said, what would you do? You could probably make the case that it was a proper tech but the context matters, and the context makes it a little more complicated.
Can I add one more thing on just in terms of like controlling emotions down the stretch? Samson Johnson, we just talked about his stat line. He's got to do more. That frustration foul where he just pushed Dane Danger, and I'm sure there was pushing and some questionable stuff going on before that. You can't lose your composure. You're the senior on this team. You've got 2 national championship rings. You can't do that. UConn, you turn that game on with a minute left in overtime. UConn, I think they're up 4, right? And you're like, wow, what a comeback. UConn's winning this game. And for, the T, we've talked about it, but I thought Sampson's foul was just as costly.
Yeah. And, then Dane Danger gets one too.
Yep.
I mean, no matter who lost this game, you were going to be able to point to things and be like, what were you doing? With UConn, it's that foul. It's Dan's tech. With Memphis, it's Dane Danger reacting there. They got a 10-second call at the end of regulation when they had a timeout.
Right.
They don't foul up 3 at the end of regulation and let Solo Ball get the shot off when they had opportunities to foul up 3. Then they do foul up 3 in overtime, and it works out for them. So, if Memphis would have lost in overtime, we're jumping on here and we're going, what is Penny Hardaway doing? You're up 12 with less than 3 to play. You got a timeout. You get a 10-second call. You can foul up 3. You don't do that. My God, who knows better than Memphis than to foul up 3? Chalmers for the tie in 2008. This would be a whole different conversation.
I mean, GP, let's take all those, the officiating, all those individual plays out of it. Let's break it down like this. UConn's offense, it was still really good. Shot 49% from the field, 22 assists against just 10 turnovers, and they were 47% from three-point line with 14 threes. Those offensive numbers are going to win you 99% of your games. Reason they lost, Memphis shot 55% from the field. This is a defensive issue for UConn right now.
Yeah, and they'll have to get that fixed. The bracket now sets up where Memphis, plays the winner of Michigan State, Colorado.
Right. Yep.
And it's weird because I've been talking about this because of my show in Memphis. And Memphis will probably play Colorado on Tuesday. I've been talking about it from that perspective. I got to flip everything around. So Memphis will likely play Michigan State. But Memphis plays the winner of Michigan State, Colorado. UConn plays the loser. Now, so quickly how these things change, and it doesn't mean anything. It's just like a funny thing to consider. UConn goes from being number 2 in the country, you're back-to-back champs, you're favorite to win the national championship. Now they can finish no better than, I believe, 5th in the Maui Invitational. So they're better at the NCAA tournament than they are the Maui one.
You know what, though? There is a silver lining, I think. Yeah. Hurley can go back to the us against the world mentality. it's not going to be one championship at a time this year. Okay. That's been the mantra for the last 2 seasons. And I'm sure they'll stick with that to a certain extent, but now it's us versus the world, and kind of the burden of that. We haven't lost yet, the longest winning streak, all that's done. And this team can try and find their new identity. They can figure out exactly what the perimeter defense is going to look like and the implications on the rotation down there. They can try and bring, some of those guys up to speed. And I do think the middle of the lineup, there are a lot of positives. Offensively, there are a lot of positives. The way that Liam McNeely and Solo Ball responded down the stretch when it looked like Memphis was about to run away with this game, that's very good news. Like I said, the middle of that lineup where you've got Caravan, McNeely, and Solo Ball, even though you got a freshman and a sophomore in that mix. And then you talk about the production you got out of Jalen Stewart, especially in that first half. There's a lot of things to be optimistic about in that 4-3-2 in those positions, those 3 positions. It's just about figuring out the consistency of what you get from the 1 and the 5 on every given day, because you can't expect Terrace Reed to do this every single night.
We're going to call that an emergency podcast. We appreciate UConn and Memphis for giving us something fun to watch on a Monday afternoon. I want to say thank you to Fink for being here for me. That's 2 in a row.
2 in a row.
Don't get comfortable. We'll start leaning on you.
Central Barbecue beats Bears Barbecue. Memphis over Connecticut.
Central Barbecue. I always tell people, absolutely, you come to Memphis, hit the rendezvous. It's in the alley. It's historic. It's great. But Central Barbecue, that's I'm glad that you are aware of Central Barbecue.
Got to do it.
That shows your stuff. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle. He's a legend. Huck Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching, listening to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple and Spotify. There's more of us than there are of them. That needs to be reflected in the comments. So please do that. And we're going to talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.